A very good evening and welcome to this special show. I'm Tamanna Inamdar. It is a historic day for the United Kingdom, but it's also one of the biggest news stories here in India. For the first time, an Indian origin individual will be the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Rishi Sunak, aged 42, has finally made it to 10 Downing Street with quite a few diversions on the way. He was in the race. He was beaten by Liz Truss, who was then Prime Minister for a very short 45 days. She had to then resign because her policies didn't go down well at all. And Rishi Sunak is now back with the added advantage of being able to say, "I told you so." It was Rishi Sunak's claim that Liz Truss's tax cut plan won't work that actually lost him the race in round one. But he's back in round two. So what does this really mean? I mean, we of course here in India always celebrate when anyone of Indian origin does well anywhere across the globe. It's a bit of appropriation because whether they're Indian or not, we want to celebrate them. But that aside, it is an important marker because stability needs to come back to the United Kingdom, to Europe, to global markets, and it is also a key measure of what happens with economic growth throughout the world. So we'll get into all of those details ahead in the show, but I want to first play out for you an excerpt of what Rishi Sunak said, his first speech as Prime Minister.
I've just been to Buckingham Palace and accepted His Majesty the King's invitation to form a government in his name. It is only right to explain why I'm standing here as your new Prime Minister. Right now, our country is facing a profound economic crisis. The aftermath of COVID still lingers. Putin's war in Ukraine has destabilized energy markets and supply chains the world over. I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them. And that work begins immediately. I will place economic stability and confidence at the heart of this government's agenda. This will mean difficult decisions to come. But you saw me during COVID doing everything I could to protect people and businesses with schemes like furlough. There are always limits, more so now than ever. But I promise you this, I will bring that same compassion to the challenges we face today. The government I lead will not leave the next generation, your children and grandchildren, with a debt to settle that we were too weak to pay ourselves. I will unite our country, not with words, but with action. I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours.
All right, to speak more on all of these different dimensions, I'm joined today by Ajay Bagga, Chairman of Elements Platform and Market Expert. Suresh Goel, former ambassador, is with me on the show. I'm also speaking with Ajay Srivastav, CEO of Dimensions Corporate Finance Services, and Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow at ORF. Welcome to all of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. I'm most curious to begin with Ajay Srivastav's views. And Ajay, I want to start with you, Mr. Srivastav, because I recall when Liz Truss was in deep trouble, and I had asked you that would Rishi Sunak have been a better choice? He can today say, I told you so. You had said he's the one who caused the crisis. What's your commentary today as we all are very seemingly excited about Rishi Sunak becoming the Prime Minister of the UK?
Well, I think, one can look back in history and say the fact that Liz Truss perhaps got snowed under the issues that she didn't even understand. Perhaps even we never understood the deep issues inside the UK system. And I'll give you one example. Who ever thought that a UK pension funds were leveraged to the hilt to juice up the yields because the interest rates were low? Who ever imagined? Can you imagine a PF trust in India or an EPF borrowing billions and billions of dollars to juice up the returns? Can you just imagine? That's what one of the things which came out in the crisis of Liz Truss was that. Number two is sheer lack of control over what's happening there. There was, and let's not get very carried away with the Indian thumb. You saw what the Home Secretary, who's also of Indian origin, from Goa, said about Indian migration and what they need to control. Having said that, I think the key lessons here for UK, Italy, China, three developments taking place at the same time are as follows. One is hedge funds, and that Sunak is from the hedge fund industry, have brought the world economies to the point where the lure of cheap money has brought not trouble to billions of people. That's what is happening everywhere. Cost of living going up, people can't afford it. What caused this? The influx of cheap money to invest in instruments, which is a classic hedge fund driven strategy for all monetary policies. Number one. Number two is the fact that, I don't think even he has the economic and political capital at the end of the day. You can bring down governments. That's fine. You can bring down Boris Johnson. You can bring down Liz Truss. But how do you capture the momentum to be a leader who will deliver to the people and not to the finance industry or not to the banking sector? I think Chairman Xi Jinping, you can blame him for many things, has taken the call. People come first. Stock market comes later. Here, let us see what the call becomes. I was disappointed with Liz Truss. I thought she had greater control over her cabinet, which it seems she did not. The guy who came in, the chancellor, did not even know that your PF funds are leveraged. That's abysmal knowledge about the country. So, well, yes, I thought they will give her a chance. She had the good ideas. But you know how the finance industry works. We want our own man there.
Well, Rishi Sunak it is. And I think that note of sort of caution that Mr. Srivastav has sounded is also a very important one. Suella Braverman, who he was referring to, is of Indian origin. She was not interested in the trade deal. She made some quite appalling comments about Indians and visas and on immigration. So it's not necessary that anyone of Indian origin is immediately our friend. Ajay Bagga, nevertheless, today is the day for all those WhatsApp forwards and memes and talks about reverse colonialism. What does it actually mean for Rishi Sunak?
No, nothing at all. You should not expect anything. If anything, they have to be stricter with India to prove their local credentials. He has shown political immaturity in two ways. One was keeping his green card, which was legally okay politically. Boris Johnson bailed him out. Second, his wife kept a non-domiciled status. Again, it did not go well with the political, situation, and he got bailed out. He was lucky. So we'll have to see what he brings to the table. Good thing is it's a technocrat. Bad thing is it's one more Goldman Sachs alumni on top and first time as a prime minister. A lot of challenges. What he brings to the table, if he is very consensual, he consults with the Bank of England, consults with the Office of the Budget. All those things will be needed now. But October 31st was the promised review for the budget. Now, if he postpones it, he will get into some deep waters. If he doesn't, he's walking into something with only 5 days to prepare for it. So a lot of questions, Tamanna. I would not be at all linking India to it. I don't expect any favorable treatment to India from his appointment as such. We have seen that earlier, the Home Secretary that you mentioned, even before her, Preeti Patel was of Indian origin. We didn't get anything from her at all. So they have to prove their credentials. The second part is the UK economy is in doldrums. It is in a very tight spot. Fiscal deficit is very high. It will probably cross 8% this year. Current account deficit, because you moved out of one of the biggest blocks in the world with Brexit without any way of making up for it. And the progress has been very slow with unilateral FTAs. So they are in trouble on the trade front also. Third is foreign investments are drying up. Foreign investors are not willing to treat it like a G7 country, given the state of its finances and the politics. The political discount factor of Liz Trust was about 20 billion pounds. How was that? That was the excess borrowing cost with the yields going up. That has come down to zero. So Rishi has brought that to the table. All the very best to him. But India is prematurely celebrating nothing for us. Very difficult task and no easy way to bridge the gap. You have a cost of living crisis for the
Yes.
large portion of population. A 30% lead with the Labour Party over the Conservatives. That's why they want a general election. So survival, stability, sanity, these will be the mantras that he'll bring to the table. Don't expect any fireworks.
Don't expect any fireworks. I mean, already the jokes have begun about how long Rishi Sunak will last. But today is truly his day in a sense. Sushant, Sareen, did you see Rishi Sunak back in the race? And what it will actually mean? I mean, I know we're saying that he's not an Indian citizen. So, he may be of Indian origin. But his father-in-law has founded one of our largest tech companies. There is definitely a connection there. He's very, open about how he celebrates his faith, etc. Do you think that's going to help in any real terms? Because what do we really need from the UK, from the Indian perspective? We need them to finalize that trade deal, the deadline of which was Diwali.
But Tamanna, who's more desperate for the trade deal, India or the UK? So the question is that the trade deal is all set and ready. But if you have, some people who think they are more white than the whites and they need to do this virtue signaling to prove their credentials, as somebody was mentioning, then good luck to them. India doesn't need UK as much as the UK needs India, right? One. Secondly, it's all very well. Remember, the Conservative Party is a party of billionaires anyways. So it's all very well to take pot shots at Rishi Sunak for his wife's fortune and, whatever else he has done or he's achieved. But I wonder if all those issues would be raised if he was not brown, but he was white. So there is racism at play. And the first round, he did not make it because racism came into full play. This time around, they desperately needed him because Liz Truss messed up big time. And Boris Johnson before her had messed up big time. With fiscal profligacy, and now they need to calm. Now you can say whatever you want to say about the markets. If the markets are that irrelevant, or the financial world or financial industry is that irrelevant, then feel free to cock a snook at them, and then pay at your own peril. And one of the reasons why Sunak has been brought back is because it's the economy stupid. It's as simple as that. Now, of course, people can keep going on in raptures about, the fact that multicultural Britain, which is all hogwash, right? Because if it was so multicultural, Rishi Sunak was a better candidate even last time around. And yet...
It is astonishing. It is astonishing that he has made it to the top post. And it is a reflection of the diversity in their politics, in their public life, and in their culture. I mean, we have to admit that.
Let's not make too much of it. When it came to making him the prime minister, the reason why he lost the last election because the traditional conservative vote bank was not ready to vote for him, even though, he was the better candidate. But this time around, they probably had no choice. Just one more point, Tamanna. The issue is not whether he will do good by India. He is not India's prime minister. He's not an Indian. He's a British guy. The one thing which goes in his favor is that he is not ashamed of his heritage. He wears it as a badge of honor, unlike most other people of Indian origin who tried, you remember that clown Bobby Jindal and some of these others in America who try and do virtue signaling, try and act more white than the white. He doesn't pretend all of that. So the issue is not whether he'll do something good for India. The issue is whether he'll do something good for Britain and not do something bad against India. And I think on that, he is sensible enough to not do something bad against India or not carry this chip on his shoulder that he must show that he is actually a Britisher and, diss India so that he can prove his credentials. I don't think he's going to do that, which is a good thing for us. We want to deal with Britain as equals. We want to deal with them as two sovereign countries should deal with each other. We are not seeking any favors from them. They are not in a position to give us any favors. But if they don't harm our interests, that is good enough. And one last point. A lot was said about Priti Patel, the Home Secretary. To be honest, people who know what was happening behind the scenes will tell you that Priti Patel tried very hard, when it came to things related to India, of India's interests, which are also in Britain's interest. Again, it was the racist British bureaucracy and the Foreign Office, which actually continued to put spokes in the wheel. But, you have to know what was happening on the inside to understand how exactly she was stymied and not allowed to deliver on some of the things which she was talking about.
I think the excitement about Rishi Sunak is not so much that he, as the Prime Minister of the UK, will grant special favors to India or do something good for India or not harm India. I think it's just about seeing someone who looks like you in the top post of UK's politics. Maybe that's a part of the excitement, and there's really no logic to it. Ambassador Goel, you want to just come in on this aspect? Is how we feel proud when Sundar Pichai heads Google, or you have all of these big multinational companies going in for Indian origin CEOs. As we're basking in a little bit of that reflected glory that maybe we share the same gene pool. Yes. But beyond that, there isn't really much to it, is there?
Absolutely, Tamanna. The fact, I was reading an article just before I came on to this discussion. The fact is that all these Indians of whom we are very, very proud because they have achieved excellence in the other countries, and therefore they seem to represent an excellent Indian as against an argumentative Indian all the time, is that they perform well in a different environment, in an external environment. The same people did not perform, or they were not here to perform so well in India. Therefore, the issue that they are of Indian origin is completely irrelevant. I agree completely that Rishi Sunak, first and foremost, is a British Prime Minister. In fact, his being of Indian origin, which is again being debated because Pakistani media has already begun to suggest that he's actually of Pakistani origin, but that's a very detailed kind of a thing. The fact is that he's being labeled as a person of Indian origin, or even as somebody who's wearing his being a Hindu as a badge of honor, can make his job that much more difficult, because the Conservative Party, of which it's a member, is going to judge his every step on the basis whether he is more Indian than British or he's more British than Indian. He's going to be tested at every step, number one. Number two, please remember that in the last elections, Liz Truss beat him for one simple reason. When the chips fell down, he was still not considered British enough by the members. Therefore, but now that he's a prime minister, at every step of the way, he will have to gain the trust and confidence of the Conservative Party to keep them aligned to him. Number three, the Conservative, even though the difficulties are economic, but he will not be able to perform any better than Liz Truss if he does not have the trust of Conservative Party. Therefore, his first step is going to be really to win the confidence and trust of the Conservative Party. And in that process, his image of being a Hindu will not really work in his favor. And one last point. We celebrate every time that an Indian comes, but we completely forget that he is not an Indian. He is a British. And therefore, if he has to take a decision where there is a contest between Indian interest and the British interest, he will have to play for the British interest, not the Indian interest.
As he should, as the Prime Minister of that country. It would be bizarre to expect him not to put, his nation's interest at the top. Let's come to the path ahead. In his opening comments, Rishi Sunak spoke about difficult decisions which will have to be made. And that's, I think, the key word. Ajay Srivastav, what could be these difficult decisions?
One is, of course, that what to do with the energy cost. Will it be passed on to the people and therefore their cost goes up by 3 times? Versus, will there be a subsidy like what Indian government does when they hold the price in BP from the PSU refining companies? And whether that kind of model will be done there and how we'll pay for it. I think that's one key decision. The second key decision, of course, comes that with the inflation this high, what do they do with this money supply and interest rate? Because if that keeps going up, the ability of people to take mortgages or even make their livings meet, get the grocery budget, even that is under threat. So what do you do with those people? And that's a large number of people, which I discussed initially, that, we are having a situation in every country that a large number of our people are unable to meet their daily needs, while the focus of most political leadership, or at least the financial leadership, is on the stock markets and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant for them. They can't. The third, I think, most important decision he has to take is what to do with the EU at the end of the day. He's got a problem with Ireland, he's got FTAs on his table, and he's got to make up a mind as to where he wants to go. Last big decision is immigration. Anybody who's traveled to UK would know the fact, or who lives there or lives there in time. There are not enough people to work. You don't have janitors, you don't have hotel people, you don't have staff, you don't have workers, lorry drivers, you name it at the bottom end, nurses, doctors, and go on in that cycle. So you can say, I will have a strong immigration policy, but you need to have people at the end of the day. But having said that, even we also get jingoistic. Like I just heard, we don't need UK needs us. I think that both sides doesn't work well. We need each other to get trade to go up. It's not about you need me more, I need me. India needs everybody much more than anybody else. Their standard of living is $28,000 per capita. We are $1,200 per capita. So even when we go jingoistic, that's not good for us. Same way when UK goes jingoistic for us. So those 4 decisions, I think, would dictate his political fortune and how the economy goes at this point of time.
Let me get Sushant to respond to what you're saying. And Ajay Srivastav, I find it very interesting that as someone who lives and breathes stock markets, you're talking about how the new UK Prime Minister has to first make sure there's food on the table for his people, that their energy costs can be managed rather than just keeping markets happy. So that's some perspective there. Sushant, you want to respond to some of the points Mr. Srivastav made?
Yeah, to be protecting India's interests is not to be jingoistic. Both countries negotiated a trade deal. They only had to append the final signatures. More or less, it was a done deal. And then you have, this woman who's pretending to be something she's not, talk about immigration and saying that she won't let it through. And if they want to blow the deal, or they want a deal which is entirely in their favor and is not an equitable deal, it's in that context I said, well, I'm all for a trade deal. But to say that, okay, fine, Ji Hazur, my baap Sarkar, because you were my colonial master, and I will agree, I'll sign on the dotted line, whatever you want, I have no interest. I'm not going to do that. Because when it comes down to, the negotiating powers of both countries, it's in that context I said, who needs the deal much more? India has a lot more going for it worldwide than the Brits have, who walked out of, EU out of their own hubris and their own colonial nostalgia and what have you. So they need the deal. And if they want a deal on the basis of how they handled the economy in the colonial times with India, they're not going to get it. It's as simple as that. Now, if you think that is jingoistic, good luck to you. I don't think it is jingoistic. I think it is India trying to protect its own interests.
the fact is, right now, I mean, Suella Braverman was in no position to push the deal. That government was in no position to push the deal. They've had 3 prime ministers in 7 weeks. So first they have to get their house in order. Ajay Baka, that will be the focus before any other kind of deal. That was first fix what's happening domestically.
Yeah, that's something they have messed up since early 2020 when they moved out formally from the European Union trade deal, trade bloc. And the progress has been very slow. So right now for him, the issue is the cost of living crisis. There is no easy fix. The issue is the fiscal deficit, the current account deficit, which is because of the trade deficit, how to keep the borrowing costs of the government down. The energy subsidy is calculated at about 100 billion pounds over the next 1 year if it stays at the levels where it is. If you don't subsidize your small scale industries and your households, you will have people freezing to death in the winters. So it's a very stark issue for him. There are no easy ways. Liz Truss unfortunately went into a trickle-down economics. She thought herself as a Thatcherite, but she got no chance with the people, and she had to be booted out. Now for him, he's learnt that lesson. I'm not expecting anything. If he's a steady Eddie for the next 6 months, that will be the best. Markets are stable today. The borrowing costs are stable. There's a mortgage crisis where mortgage lenders have pulled out because even after the government yields have gone down post Jeremy Hunt coming in and moving out most of Liz Truss's measures, still the mortgage lenders have not re-entered the market. So there is an issue. The mortgage rates have gone up. I think those need to be addressed. I think he'll be more into what can be done for the bottom half of the population rather than balancing his budget right now, but keeping an eye out that the foreign investors are very much up in arms against any unfunded spending. So he'll have to make some cuts somewhere at least to fund his welfare measures.
To take care of the people, he has to explain how he's putting forth these welfare measures and how he'll pay for them. He can't do another trust. He doesn't have much time to get that kind of confidence. It's a tough time ahead for Rishi Sunak, but of course we wish him all the luck. Thank you so much to all of you for joining us today on this special discussion.